Good evening, everybody. My name is Gardner Humphreys, and I'm the College and Career Specialist at Marshall High School. And thanks for joining tonight. I'm just going to introduce myself, and we'll give folks a couple other minutes to join while I put in some links right here. And I'm just getting a email from one or two that still need the link to log in. So let me just send that off very quickly, and then we'll get going. While we, just before we get started here, I put a couple links in the chat, and those are links that I'll refer to later this evening. One link is for Fair Test, and that's a site which collects all the testing policies for different universities. And another one is the College and Career Center webpage for Marshall on our school site. That's where the recording for tonight will be. And let's see, what else do we have up there? I think that captures all three of them. The fairtest.org site is very helpful, but you'll definitely want to check individually with the official webpage of any college to make sure it's accurate and up to date. Okay. All right, so I'm going to head over to our PowerPoint here and get us going from there. So, like I said, my name is Gardner Humphreys. I'm the College and Career Specialist at Marshall. The College and Career Center is right off the main lobby in the school. If you've never been, I'm glad to schedule an appointment to talk about your individual plans, whatever grade you are, parent or student. If you're a student, you don't need to pass to stop by. You just can pop on in, ask a question, or if we need a little longer to talk, we can set up a time to chat. If you're a parent, the best way to make sure I'm free is just to send me an email. And I'm going to put my email in the chat right here, and we can set up a time to talk. We're about to start. Next week is a good time to meet, and then we go into course registration. And that gets very busy for most of the month of February, really, where grades 9 through 10 are coming into my class through PE classes, and they sit in the College Career Center while they get pulled out to select their classes for next year with their counselor one-on-one. And while they're in the College and Career Center, I give them some activities to do, mostly in Naviance, our college and career kind of website, where they might do sort of a career personality assessment. What do I want to do for a job someday, or study in college someday? Or it could be more learning styles. We might do a short survey about what their plans are, or another type of activity. So that'll be happening mostly in February. So that's coming down the bend, just so you know what your 9th and 10th graders are going through. But tonight is kind of a refresher. So for this evening, we have our main college evening program in the fall, and we did it very early in the fall, but I like to just kind of revisit some of the topics right now before course registration starts and about halfway through the year, just so people who either weren't fully tuning in at the end of August, which is totally understandable, or who are new to Marshall, or have some specific questions they want to ask or want a refresher. And so this is more targeted towards grades 9 through 11. And I'm going to kind of give you a look at the other types of events and programs you can expect throughout the year, no matter what grade you're in at Marshall, so you know what's coming up. But I'm only going to speak for 10 or 15 minutes, just to give you some resources, some general ideas about college career readiness and what we do at Marshall. And I want to leave most of the time up for your individual questions, because I know people will have very good questions, and questions that a lot of other people are probably wondering too. So I'll go ahead and get started on the presentation. So like I said, I'm going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes. So if you have a question about a particular slide or thing I say, just jot it down. And when I'm done with the handful of slides that I have, I'll open up the chat for questions and just take the questions along the chat. And just to remind everybody, we are recording the session tonight. So if you want to watch again, or if you know someone else who wants to see it, it's going to be on the link in the chat, which says it's the Marshall link, and it says College and Career in it. So it's that one right there, College Career Center. Okay, let me go ahead and share the slides that we have for tonight. All right, so spring 2023. So we did one of these last year, and not a ton, I would say, change in terms of the content, in terms of things that all colleges aren't doing. So obviously, kind of content for the evening, I'm going to college. It might be true both for community college and four-year college. Also going to talk about careerness class that don't require college, or maybe just some, or maybe not. But that those quickly divide into kind of different specific paths. So if you have questions about any one area that's not necessarily 2 or 4 year college related, then please ask me in the question and answer period, and I can go into it in more depth. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about tonight. Some resources and where you can find information on kind of what to do during what grade to be ready. There's definitely, there's some specific things that are good to plan for during junior year. Not a whole lot of specific things for college and career ready that you might do during 9th or 10th grade, unless you have a very specific plan already. They more involve kind of solidifying your study skills, being a good student, trying new things, budgeting your time to make room for interests, kind of deepening your interests. So for in terms of timeline, we'll see in a minute what's there. But there's not a whole lot of specific steps, except maybe taking the PSAT or something that would have the name college or career on it right then. We're going to go over a few tips for signing up for classes. So not individual classes for yourself or subjects, but kind of how does that, what does a class schedule or the challenge level or the rigor level of your class schedule have to do with college and college admissions. We'll talk about SAT and ACT a little bit, although we have another presentation for that you can watch, and it's on our school webpage on the link up there. I'll touch on a few different opportunities to get information at Marshall, including things like our junior focus day or college visits. Talk about a few myths that always seem to work their way into the senior class, and also touch on financial aid. And like I said, then get to questions. So here's all the different sorts of things which I help along with the counselors provide. And we do this both at an individual level. So from the College and Career Center, you might come in and we might do a personalized plan so that you can check out a career or a job you're interested in, or it could be a military service or a certain type of college. And you might want some extra help from me in finding colleges that are maybe very strong in one particular subject area or major, or have a certain type of program, or geographically in a part of the country, and based on grades and classes that your student is already taking, so it's at the right admissions level and the right challenge level. I also have information in the College and Career Center on after school jobs or summer jobs, and in my Schoology course, which is the listed right under there, it's the Marshall Student Services course in Schoology. You can go there. It links to it off the Marshall homepage. And if you're a student, you probably use this a lot, maybe not so much if you're a parent, but you do have access to it as a parent. And that's kind of where all of the content is, and different folders for all these different topics, jobs, college, volunteering, financial aid, that sort of thing is all in the Schoology is the best place to get it if you're a student. If you're a parent, there's kind of a more streamlined version of that on the Marshall website, where a lot of the resources are as well. Other types of help you can get from me, finding test prep, talking about a test prep plan for yourself. And like I said, looking for scholarships as well. So some of the areas you would do that, like I said, we mentioned the Marshall website, mentioned Naviance earlier. That link right there, fcps.edu Naviance, is where you can do probably the best place for college research, because we have admissions data for Marshall graduates, and college admissions is very Marshall or high school specific, I should say, very locally specific. So that's a great place to do some research on that. And you can also just build an interest list of colleges as well if you're a student. Here's some events that are going to be coming in the months ahead. So not too far away. I mentioned one, which is course registration. So that's starting very soon. We had course kickoff in school today where students can start visiting and exploring different classes they might be interested in. And course registration, excuse me, where students pick their individual courses, happens all throughout February and some of March. And that's also where they'll do a unit or two in the College and Career Center. For juniors, we have almost probably 3/4 of a day in April 20th, where juniors will come to school, and it'll be like a conference day on college and career. They'll hear an opening speaker, and they'll each be able to pick 3 sessions of their own to go to, and we have about a dozen offered on everything from college admissions panels to mock college application reviews. We will have a military session. We have a session on apprenticeships for different trades, things like SAT and ACT approaches and tips, writing a great college essay. So all kinds of subjects. And that's for juniors, students only. But a lot of the material that we share that day will be posted for parents on our website. But that'll be April 20th. Students don't do anything to sign up for or do anything usual. You just come to school like normal that day. And that's what's going on then. By the time you're a senior, we have college essay help for seniors in my room every Monday afternoon. Myself and some other volunteer essay advisors who are mostly Fairfax County retired English teachers or who do college consulting on the side, but also volunteer for free with our students. And we give feedback and edit college essays or help students brainstorm ideas. We also do it online in case that's better for a student's schedule. They can't make it Monday after school. We do that kind of by appointment. The student submits a request form and I match them with one of the essay advisors, and then they meet either on Zoom or the phone, or they use Google Docs with suggested edits. We usually have our financial aid night in October, and that's for all grades. So that's good to learn how that works, even if you're a 9th or 10th grader. We do it in October because that's when that main federal form opens up that all the colleges want for financial aid, at least for need-based aid. So you don't have to actually do those forms until you're a senior. So some people wait until then to look at that content, but that'll be there for all grades in October. And let's see, the PSAT and senior SAT, we always have that practice SAT for grades 10 and 11. That's always in October. It's usually the second Wednesday in October. And there'll be a kind of a registration or intent form sent out from Marshall or Fairfax County FCPS for that. And usually you submit that to make sure we have a head count, but it's given in school on a Wednesday. And that's the time where usually when we only give the practice SAT in school. And sometimes we offer an SAT for seniors in school, although I don't know if they'll still do that every year. That's just something they started doing during COVID times to give people the opportunity close to home to take it. We'll do this again next year as well. So you can count on a refresher if you're a 9th, 10th, or 11th grader even. And we also give the military assessment, which is not just for enlisting, but it's a general career kind of college, like a major, what you might want to study, do, or do for a career, not just in the military, but also if you do join the military, they use that for your placement as well. And if there's a student or a parent who thinks their student is interested in taking that, we give it for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So it's not for 9th graders, but you can give me your name. And if we get enough students in the spring, we'll have a spring ASVAB, it's called. And we have to get at least, I think, about 15 to have one in the spring, but we always give one in the fall. We have enough interest there. Okay, moving along. So I mentioned before, so, obviously I help in all areas. The majority of our students do some kind of 2 or 4-year college, but that's not the only path. And we have a good number of students every year who look for a job, particular type of career, join one of the services, maybe take a gap year. So, or even do one of the certificate programs at Northern Virginia Community College, where you just take a group of classes, say 5 or 6, and you get trained in a certain area and certified and go work in that area. So there's all different levels. And this is a particularly good piece on kind of, people are generally familiar with, okay, if I'm doing the college route, well, I think, junior year, I might need to do this, and senior year, I might need to do this. But if you were thinking more broadly about just preparing yourself for a career or a job, and removing it from the college. This from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a nice kind of outline with different milestones that would come along the way. How do you explore different elective opportunities you have in high school to learn what you like? What kind of work study, volunteering, work-based learning can you do in high school? What are other milestones where you might want to develop a resume, talk to people, and try out different summer opportunities for developing a work plan for yourself. So I encourage you to check that out. The data in there is, I think, job outlook for 2015. So don't pay attention to the particular job growth data, but the outline of kind of how to be career ready is helpful. Okay, next up. So I like to use this right here. If you're wondering, what would a full list be of all the things I might consider doing in ninth grade to be kind of college ready, you would get more than any average person ever does with this link right here. But it's nice to kind of know, what the whole world is out there, and you can pick and choose what you feel you're ready for and what you want to work in to what year. But this is a great handbook from this nonprofit called ECMC. It's called the Opportunities Guide right there. So let me see if I could actually, I don't want to highlight that and mess up the flow. But if you want to go back to this, you could cut and paste that in your browser, and maybe during the Q&A, I'll try to put that in the chat as well. That has a nice timeline per grade of all the different things you might do just to be college ready. And it involves things not just like maybe taking a practice SAT, but going to some college fairs or doing some campus tours, going to some of the visits when they come to Marshall, that type of thing. A few tips for course registration. So we're going to be starting that next month. Like I said, do think about balancing not just the challenge level, but also leaving room for some interest and curiosity for whatever the students is interested in exploring. Colleges expect you to take an elective, or to have a class that's fun and kind of is a bright spot in your day, with something that just you chose, and maybe and kind of gets at a different area of your life other than just the core subjects. So you would do that both, which I think can also help keep students motivated academically, and also is a good balance for mental health. I think it's too difficult and probably not advisable to try to gear a schedule or pick classes based on trying to get admitted to one college, because they admit students on a whole kind of balance of things. All of your classes, they expect students to have strengths and weaknesses. And so, it's too difficult to predict what's going to happen in the end anyway. So, but I can give people general feedback on kind of, this college, they expect you to be mostly IB, or they would be okay with 2 or 3, or, do they want mostly all A's, or are they okay with a range of A, B's and maybe some C's or things like that? And just another tip is most colleges, more than half probably do want foreign language, but there are a lot that don't. But if you do choose not to take, say, at least 2 foreign language, you'll have to ask for a special exemption from many colleges, because I would say more than half the colleges request at least 2 foreign language classes, and some want 3. Generally, if you make it up to the 3rd level, say up to Spanish 3, you're definitely fine with all the college requirements. And sometimes you can get an exemption, especially if you have an IEP or 504. But that may change some of your choices if you only take, say, 1 foreign language credit, and sometimes 2. Now for SAT and ACT updates, there's a full presentation on kind of what's in the tests, what role they play in admissions on the Marshall website right there. And you can check that out. We have a guest presenter who's also coming to Junior Focus Day, who is from a test prep company. So that kind of gets at both sides, kind of what role is it? Is it right for you? Are you going to need it? But also, if you do want to really kind of focus in on it and do the best job, what are some tips there? The general landscape of the standardized tests is what I'm hearing from schools is that most will remain test optional for next year's senior class, but some are going back to requiring tests. Not many have announced it yet, but will be at least a handful that might go back to requiring tests for next year. There are very few that require them right now, So I think probably still next year, over half will still be test optional. And that's when, just to decode the term, test optional means the college is not going to require SAT or ACT scores from you when you apply, but it gives you the option of looking at your scores and choosing whether or not to submit them. And so it's actually a checkbox. It's not an open-ended thing. You have to choose, yes, I'm going to submit test scores, or no, I'm not going to. And if you don't submit test scores, then usually you can't look at them later. And if you get a good one or change your mind, although a few colleges allow that, but if you choose not to submit scores to the college, then that means you're going test optional. So that's what that means. So I think most colleges will be test optional, and they won't penalize you then if you don't submit a score. And so it becomes a little trickier then to kind of look at, okay, here's my scores, my highest kind of combined score, should I use it for this college or should I use it for that college? And that might be a different answer for each school. So students often come to me with their list of schools, and we do a little research and we figure out, okay, should you use your scores? And if so, which schools were they helped with? Which schools will they not really add anything because you're right in the mix, or which schools will it, maybe you're in the lower end of the range and you wouldn't want to use test scores for that school. But the growing trend is, I think more colleges will remain test optional than before COVID. And so that seems to be a kind of a permanent trend. It's just a question of whether how quickly it will grow and how many schools will go back. The SAT is promising they're going online next spring. So we'll see if that happens on time. It's been pushed back before, but it's going to come one of these years. The ACT, I don't believe, is announced their schedule for it yet. And if you are a 10th grader or an 11th grader, you would have a PSAT. And if you took the PSAT in school, which most students did last October, you would have gotten an email from the College Board, that's the SAT people, to whatever email the student put on the test form. And that would be, if you haven't logged in to see your PSAT scores from last October yet, you check your email from an email from the College Board, or so that says PSAT, and that would be your link to log in. Marshall doesn't manage your account, but I might be able to help you log in. So if you do need help, student, just stop by, see me in school. I can help you log in. A lot of people do have to call customer service for College Board because they maybe have 2 or 3 College Board accounts. Maybe the student created one and then the parent did, or each parent did and the student, and then they had a new one that had different information from what the student put on the test form. So sometimes you can get 2 or 3 forms and you have to consolidate them. Okay, next up, here's some other opportunities coming for Marshall. That first link up there under college visits and fairs, that is the National Association of College Admission Counseling, and they usually have a directory of fairs all around the area, everything from Northern Virginia, Prince William to Baltimore, depending on how far you want to travel. The second website is the Coalition, which is kind of like a Common App, but different, kind of a competitor to the Common App, and they organize some fairs as well. These are a few other myths where if you hear, you might want to challenge, really think about it. A lot of people get caught up in some of these, or they spread like wildfire through the student and parent population. I encourage people not to think that the college with the lowest admission rate is, always the best. Try to think about factors of fit for your student and where they're going to perform the best, be the most productive, the best adjusted to that college and that campus. And that can have to do with a whole lot of factors. So, reputation, I do think, can help and makes a difference. But, think about also what is the environment where your student would really thrive. You hear about good schools and bad schools. I challenge people to not think that a college maybe that accepts B- students or B students is a bad school, or if it's too easy to get into, it's a bad school. So, really look at the things which will differentiate the schools from each other. How much student support they provide, how much challenge, how much individualized education, all of the different opportunities on the campus. Usually when we get to senior year every year, a lot of people think that they have to apply to a college early, or that it's kind of a golden ticket in admissions, and you just have to figure out where to use it. But I think that can be a bit of a trap. So, normal college deadlines for seniors are in January, and some of the early action is when you can just apply early and get your answer early. You don't have to go to that college. Early decision is when you apply early, sometimes as early as October, usually November. And if you get accepted by that school, you have to go there and you can't apply anywhere else, and you have to withdraw all the other applications. So, to be ready that early can be difficult. And definitely if you want to do early decision, the one where you can only apply early decision to one college, and then if you get in, you have to go there, nowhere else, that's giving away a lot of choice. And that's, you should make sure that you get as much out of the deal as you're giving up. And with some colleges, it's not necessarily any easier to get in if you apply by the early deadline. Sometimes that early crowd applying to that college is even more motivated and achieve higher achieving than the regular pool. Now, some other colleges, it does make sense to apply at least by their non-binding early action deadline, because they just take a lot of their freshman class from that early deadline. They like to do that. And so that takes a little research to figure out which colleges are like that. One that pops right up is Virginia Tech, who's moved to kind of encouraging everybody, just out loud to use their early action deadline. And they do fill the majority of their freshman class using their early deadline. And their regular deadline is a much smaller space. It's probably like 20 or 30% left. So that's an unusual situation with that school. But with some schools, it can help. With other schools, it might not make sense to apply early for several different reasons. And also, if you apply early decision, you're committing to go there if you're accepted, and you probably don't even know what you're going to get, if anything, for financial aid. So you won't really even know the price of the school for you. A couple other things, test scores. When I talk to parents of my generation or close to it, we all grew up where test scores were at least as important as grades, and everyone talked about your SAT, and that has changed greatly. And a lot of even super competitive schools have moved away from using the SAT or the ACT as a major yardstick in admissions. And some other colleges, still do use it, but it's very random and hit or miss whether or not a school weighs these tests. So you really have to kind of look at your schools individually and figure out if it's going to be a benefit for you or not, which is nice. It's a choice that wasn't there, 20 or 30 years ago, but over the past, I'd say, especially 10, 15 years, whether or not the SAT is used by a particular admissions office is very individualized. And it's not really just the super selective colleges that use it the most. It's really just kind of their philosophy. And that's for a whole number of reasons, which you can talk about more, but mostly having to do with there's so many schools out there that have a large AP or IB curriculum, that the grades and the classes that these colleges are seeing are much more standardized, and they can compare high schools to each other better. They don't need a standardized test to compare students. They have more standardized grades and curriculum. And also they track data in a whole lot of different ways. So they just don't need to rely on it as much as they used to. And the other one is a lot of students and maybe parents feel the student needs to settle on a major before they pick out their colleges or their list of colleges. And I would say most colleges expect you to do that when you get there. It's great if you already have one. And some colleges will look pretty closely at your choice of major on the application, but most just view it as you indicating some interest on your application. And they're not holding you to it, and it's not something that they're really going to evaluate you by. There are some colleges that look closely when you're applying, as a senior, and you say, I think I'm going to be an accountant. Or, for example, Virginia Tech, another one that does it differently, or at least in another way, they do have you apply directly to a major. So they are looking at your application in light of what you say you want to study and your major of choice, but they also allow you to pick undecided in some areas. But for most colleges, they expect to do most of the major or career exploration with you when you get there. They have just a large system that starts right from the freshman year to do that. Financial aid and scholarships. Here's some resources down there. All colleges have something called a net price calculator, or an NPC, on their sites. You can get an idea maybe how much financial aid you'll have. They set different price levels for different families, even if you're applying to the same college. They take into account everything from your family income and savings and assets to maybe merit scholarships that a student might get, not because they have the super high GPA necessarily, although usually it's linked to GPA, but it could also be because of what the student wants to study or unique interests. And you can do some good research on more affordable colleges by using sites like this, the Department of Education website, College Navigator, right there. And that other one, finaid.org. That's a good one as well. Okay, here's some other sites, which I'm going to mostly just leave up here so you can use on your own so I can save time for some questions, but I at least want to tell you what they are. Under college research and advice, the first one is the SAT People, the College Board. They just have an easy to navigate, well laid out college search, which gives you good profile information at a glance. So that's a good place to look. I would say also just getting some practical information, especially if you're interested in UVA, but also just for competitive admissions in general. The representative for UVA that reads the applications of the Marshall students her name's Janine Lalonde, and she runs the blog for the admissions office at UVA. And that's the URL right there, uvaapplicationblogspot.com. So that's a whole lot of good, not just information, but just perspective on the process as well. And the last one, that HSCW Counselor's Corner Blogspot, that's a college admissions counselor who's just teaches continuing education courses for counselors and is just very respected in the field and fairly objective. There's a couple of those financial aid and scholarship sites I mentioned earlier, and also Career Exploring right there. Those are two good ones. One is a good kind of government general one right there, and the MyPath is especially for tech or cyber fields. Okay, well, with that, I think I'm going to turn the camera back on and turn it back on me, and I'll open up the chat here and we'll go ahead and talk about your questions. And if I have time, I will also put a couple more links in the chat. Okay, so the chat should be open right now. So if anyone has a question, go ahead and add it in there. And while we're getting our first questions, I'm just going to go ahead and try to find that link for that timeline. There it is. Okay. Oh, great. All right. I was worried no one was going to ask a question, but let's see. First question, how do student volunteer hours factor into their application to college, if at all? Good way to state the question. A lot of students have an idea that they have to volunteer, or they need to be well-rounded kind of in all areas, but there is no requirement for volunteering for colleges, although some colleges do like to see it, and they'll usually communicate that. A good place to find out if a college cares about service or community service is through the visits. And so every fall, over 100 colleges visit Marshall, and they do short information sessions with our students, and it's open to juniors and seniors, but it's usually only 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 students at most. So it's a great talk, and it's usually the admissions person assigned to Marshall, and they will give you an idea whether or not service is important. I would say most colleges, just as a generalization, view service as one type of activity that you do outside of school that shows your interest and shows that you do more in life than just study. Then again, some colleges are perfectly happy getting someone who does spend all of their time studying and getting really good grades and is going to do the same with their college. So it depends on the school, really, whether or not you kind of would want to try to express some of your interests and activities by volunteering. It's always good, I think, to have some activities outside of school or high school other than studying, but a lot of colleges view things like an after-school job that you get to earn money, or taking care of brothers, sisters, or volunteering, or sports, or music as all kind of the same type of a thing. They just want to know what you're interested in, what you do. You describe it to them when you apply. You don't really have to, they're not going to ask for documentation or proof. But what I would do is I suggest students just make a Google Doc of what you're doing, if you're volunteering, if you have after school jobs, other activities, awards, things you get along the way. You might shape it up into a resume later, but at least put some anecdotes or some memories. And they're going to ask you to estimate kind of how many hours or weeks you spend on these things, but it's just an estimation. So that's good to do, but it's nothing you need to do for graduate, or it's not something that all colleges will want to see across the board. Okay. All right, let's go back up to the questions and see what we have next. Okay, one question from earlier: are you going to email the PowerPoint deck to parents? What I'll do is I'm going to post it on our website, and then I'll email out the link, like I did the link for tonight's Zoom, so you can access it on our website. And when it's on our website, it will be at this link up at the top of the chat, which says Marshall fcps.edu College and Career Center. On average, how many colleges are kids applying to? Well, it's so all over the place. It's hard. I'm sure we could come up with an average if I ran a report, but I think it's everything from 4 to 5 to 15. I think when students get over, tend to get over 10 or 15, if they're getting up around 15 to 20, usually they're trying to get into more very hard colleges, and they're hoping to increase their chances of getting in by adding an additional very selective colleges, which is a hard game to play because they're still super selective, and so it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get better results. So I think the more researched your list is, the fewer colleges you need on there, because you're pretty sure of your results. Or some people just aren't really sure what they're looking for. So I think the more kind of research and thought that you put into it, you'll probably have plenty of options. If you have anywhere from a dozen colleges on down, to several, it's good to have some options. Okay, let me just try to expand the chat here so I can scroll down and see a few of those. What number? Oh, okay. No, we just talked about that one. So that was a very similar question. I think we got that one. How soon can students request for teacher and counselor recs? So what we usually do is, I mentioned Junior Focus Day. What we usually talk about this on Junior Focus Day, which is April 20th. And then we ask students to invite teachers to both give input on the counselor letter. So that's just kind of quotes and examples from class. But also that's when we ask students to think about what teacher they're going to pick for their letter writer for their college applications. Most colleges want one teacher letter and a counselor letter. So they pretty much all want the counselor letter, because that covers the whole student in the class, outside of the class. And then a lot of colleges, like, in addition to the counselor letter, to have at least one teacher letter that really focuses on classroom skills and classroom characteristics. Some colleges allow more than one teacher letter, but they might have a maximum of, say, 3 letters. One of them would be the counselors, and then you could pick 2 teachers. So I can definitely help students, parents strategize which teachers to pick, but they generally like them to be junior year 11th grade teachers, because the content is just more advanced, and that's usually a better letter anyway. It's just a little more recent. So usually you're going to pick an 11th grade teacher for that. And you may not necessarily do that if you're switching schools, or you had an incredible 10th grade teacher that knew you really well. But what you're trying to do with these letters is, not just say a teacher who will use all kinds of great verbiage about you, but one that really knows your work, knows when you've tried hard. Even if you didn't always succeed at things, they know the effort and the personality that you put into it. So you want one that's going to tell the best story, knows you the best, not necessarily, the friendliest one, or the one you got the straight A in. So generally that's going to be junior year, but not always. Okay, and they actually invite the teacher to do the letter their senior fall normally. It can be a little different depending on their deadlines, but for most people it's going to be their senior fall. They'll send them a link to upload a letter. Okay, at what point in high school does the college guidance team start working directly with individual students? Well, they do it all the time in certain circumstances, or by appointment, or when they want to talk, or like signing up for classes. but there is at least one time a year where they meet with each student individually, everybody, and that's this course registration coming up. So over the month of February, they'll meet with each student individually and talk about what courses they want to take. And, that's based on their interests and how they did in their current courses and where they're coming from, where they want to go, all that kind of thing. So that is one time that happens, every year right there. But I encourage you to, make contact with your counselor, or email or phone, or say hi and get to know them. Okay. Is there a good way to research and compare schools with honors colleges and their benefits? That is a good question. I haven't seen any kind of a clearinghouse that compares honors programs, but they generally offer, they can be pretty different. So it is a good thing to compare. And honors colleges can be very different than just the general study at the college, because honor colleges usually offer, first pick of classes or smaller classes. You can avoid taking some prerequisites or, sort of basic core classes. Sometimes the students already feel they've already had if they took IB or other classes. Sometimes the honors programs come with, research money or special housing or travel opportunities. So it is definitely worth checking out, but I'm not aware of a site like that testing site that I shared earlier. I'm not aware of a site that does that for honors, but if you hear of one, let me know. Okay. As someone who is potentially interested in psychology, is there a certain science that colleges like to see? Well, that's a good question, because colleges don't necessarily expect you to have taken a lot of the subject that you say you're interested in yet, but they would like to see good core science skills, or social science skills, if you're interested in psychology. So, that's one of those fields where you might be a little bit more interested in the research or the clinical part or some of the applications, or the concepts. So you could go a lot of different ways with that, but to be a strong candidate for, say, a psychology major at a college, they would be looking at, a lot of different courses for that one, and not just science and math, but probably also, your analytic ability, your writing. So that would be pretty broad, I would think. But a lot of people think you have to take a class, whatever major you're interested in, you have to take that class if it's pretty specific in high school. But not so. Colleges expect you to start doing that when you're there, and they mostly what they want to see is core academic skills at whatever highest level is appropriate for you in that area. Now, if you do have a chance to take an elective in that area, like, when we've had IB psychology at Marshall, great, because you'll get exposed to those ideas. You'll be able to talk about it. It might lead to something else you do, a club or volunteering or who knows. But you don't always actually have to take the specific course. Next question, when should the student fill out the FAFSA? So the FAFSA is the main federal form that colleges ask for to be able to offer you or not any financial aid. And it's done senior year. It opens up in October, and you do one for your student when they're a senior, and then you update it every year in college. And if you have additional children going to college, then you do one for each child when they're a senior. It takes about an hour, so it's not too bad. Not as bad as doing your taxes. It's free. It's on the Department of Education website. So make sure if you're looking at it, you're using the official .gov Department of Ed site. And we offer help in doing it at school. So, if you're a senior right now and you haven't done it yet, you can come in and I could help you do it. I know a lot of the simple answers. We also have a nonprofit partner, which has these financial aid champions, which can handle more trickier, more complex questions for it. But yeah, it's not too bad. Some students do the FAFSA form themselves. It does require information from parents or guardians, unless you're an emancipated minor. But you can do it a number of different ways. And like I said, it takes about an hour, and you can send it to your college for free, and they look at that. and then form your financial aid package. Some schools, there's only 2 of the about 15 public colleges in Virginia, William & Mary and UVA, ask for a longer financial aid form, which is called the CSS profile. And that takes a little about half an hour longer to do. But there's only about 2 out of 15, at least in Virginia, do that. So only a handful. Okay, well, next question. What GPA do you provide in the research program application or internship application? Is it weighted or unweighted? Well, that's a good question. Usually the application will give you some direction on that. So if you're applying to, say, a research opportunity or an internship, they will usually ask you for your GPA from high school, and they'll ask if they want it weighted or not. The GPA that we post in SIS that students can see, or in Naviance, if you look at it there, is weighted, and it's always weighted. So that's the default one that we calculate, and that's what we put on our transcripts. That's how most schools do it, but not all. Every once in a while, if you have a job opportunity or college or something that wants an unweighted GPA, you just take our school profile, which has the point values on it, and you have to calculate your own GPA just using that, and it will tell you the point values without the weights. The weights is when you take an IB or an honors class, and because it's a little harder than the standard classes, if you earn a B, which would normally be a 3.0 in your GPA, if you took it at the IB level, the 3.0 would go in as a 4.0. So your letter grade would still be a B for that class, but it would be a higher weight on your GPA. Okay. Regarding grades, is it better to take honors or IBs classes but not get straight A's, or take less advanced classes but get straight A's? That is the classic dilemma of our time. And the shorter answer is there's no better way to do it or not. You just really want to figure out which advanced classes are right for you, and that you have a good chance of getting mostly A's and B's in, because you can't really devise a particular schedule or number of IBs around any kind of one college. So there are some colleges where you could take full IB and you could get a straight A's, and it still wouldn't be enough to get in. And there's other ones that don't need to see very many IBs at all. So that is kind of something we can look at individually. And like, just for an example, University of Virginia, UVA, they like to see mostly a full IB schedule. You don't have to be full IB, but that's probably the most impressive schedule to them. We still have plenty of students who are accepted in UVA that aren't full IB, but I think they would say, our representative that I mentioned earlier, she would probably say that's probably, obviously, you've done the most challenging schedule at Marshall if you've done the full IB. But then they also get underneath there and they look at, all right, which subjects did this student take at the higher level, because even within IB, if you're all IB, there's still higher level and standard level classes, and there's still just other classes that very few people take, like when we had IB Math HL, or there's classes that don't give out very many A's, so there's levels within levels. But a school like UVA would want to see mostly IB and mostly A's. That's a school that you need a pretty high GPA to get in, but you kind of need both. For that school, you need mostly IBs and mostly A's. Other schools, it would be more of a mix. So the best way to do it, though, is just kind of, you have some colleges in mind, you could definitely run them by me, or you could look at the admissions graphs in Naviance and just sort of see what sort of GPAs. If you look at those graphs, it'll say the GPAs of the seniors who are accepted to all these colleges. And it also say the number of IB or honor classes they took. So that's helpful. Okay, next question. What is the guaranteed admission agreement between the Virginia Community College system and Virginia universities? How many credit hours does the student need to take to have guaranteed admission to 4 universities? So that guaranteed admission agreements are when you start at Northern Virginia Community College and you kind of sign a contract saying that if you take these, usually kind of your core classes, for 2 years, and you get a certain GPA, you will guaranteed to be accepted as a junior into the 4-year college. And so all of the Virginia public colleges have these contracts with NOVA. And then there's a lot of other colleges in Virginia and outside of Virginia that have the contracts too. But I'll say this also, generally speaking, if you go to NOVA for 2 years and you get a B average or above, you're a very good transfer student to lots of colleges, just because the GPAs that you need to transfer from community college or a four-year college to another college are generally lower. They don't need to be as high as trying to get in there right out of high school, because it's just not as easy to get so many A's in college usually, and or at community college usually. And you've also already handled a lot of that, adjustment to college work and the social life and all that. So transferring tends to be a bit easier. But Nova has all these guaranteed admission agreements on their site. So I don't know the credit hours off the top of my head, but it's generally the equivalent of 2 years of 4 classes each semester. And they might give three credits per class on average. But you can look up those on the Nova site, and they'll lay out kind of what classes you need to take and what sort of grades you need to get. Usually it's around anywhere from a C+ to a B+ average. With some majors, though, if you say you want to transfer to Virginia Tech or George Mason, you want to do a very specific major when you get there as a junior, you may not want to do the guaranteed admission agreements, because you to take specific classes that those don't allow for. So what you want to do in those cases, if you want to transfer to Virginia Tech and do that specific major, you talk to Virginia Tech and say, I'm going to start at Nova, but I want to end up with you junior year. Which classes should I take? And these colleges, especially the Virginia ones, do send representatives to Nova to help with class selection and to answer questions and make sure, if you want to transfer, that you can do it without losing a semester or a year. Okay, next up, how heavily do clubs affect college acceptance? That's a little bit like that activity question earlier of volunteering. Clubs are good, but they're an activity. So they're one of many things you could do with your after school time. And it's just really a matter of students explaining on the applications what they're interested in and why. Clubs aren't any better or worse than any other activity, but activities in general do allow people to explore things, have things to talk about. And that's certainly one of them. Okay, next question. As a senior, how many school days can a student miss to tour colleges? So that used to be 3, and I'm not 100% sure it's still the same, but that's the way that works. The administrator that you turn in the pre-excused absence to would know that. Does the teacher letter have to be from the same subject that they're planning to major in? No. And for most colleges, since they're not really reading your application in terms of what you think you might major in, then you really want the teacher who's just going to tell, like I said, knows you the best, is going to tell the best story about your academic effort and your skills. Now, if you're making a very strong case in your application that you've, always wanted to be a doctor and nothing else, or an engineer or something like that, if you do have a very specific focus and you keep bringing it up in your, in your essay and your activities and everything, then I probably would try, at least consider, that your first teacher letter is within that field somewhere in a science or math class. Doesn't have to be, like I said, but the more specific or forceful you are about saying you're interested in that, the more they may like to hear that. Okay, next question. What do students usually do during a good gap year, and how hard is it to apply accept colleges once they're not in school anymore? So yeah, so most colleges would advise, if you're very interested in a particular school, most colleges would advise you to apply to that school as if you're going to start there, not do a gap year, and then request a gap year. And then the college, if your gap year proposal is accepted, they would save your spot for after that first year. And so not all colleges do that, but that's fairly common. So if you're pretty sure you do want to go to college after your gap year, it can be a good idea to apply to some schools, check out their gap year policies, and they all have kind of different ways of doing it, different policies. But it can be a good idea to apply to college as a senior anyway, get accepted. And then usually you write, a short request, a description of what you want to do. And if it's any kind of formal plan, it's usually approved, something having to do with volunteering or working or traveling or something like that, that there's some structure to it. It's usually approved, but you should check with each college because they may have different policies on that. But you can also take a gap year and just apply as a first-time freshman which just means you're not a transfer student, but you're also not coming right out of high school. Okay, next up. What does the counselor base the counselor recommendation letter on, and what does it cover? So the counselor letter, like I said, covers the whole student. So obviously they're trying to make the academic case for the student first and foremost, because that's the first thing the college looks at. Would this student, can they do the work at this college? Would they excel at it? And so that's generally where they're starting, but there's a whole bunch of other areas. So they're also making good cases for the students, things they know about the character, any kind of extracurriculars they've done. And so most of the information the counselors use comes from the student and the parents and the teachers. So when your student is a junior, and also this is connected to Junior Focus Day, after Junior Focus Day, we'll send home these input forms, like a Google form, and they have questions which just get you thinking about your child, and you can give us examples from high school, pretty much all from the high school years, just about what makes them tick, things they're interested in, activities they like, things they've done, accomplish. And so they use all that information to write the letters. They also explain things that need explaining. If a student transfers schools a lot, or was out with a medical issue for a while, or generally does really well in the subject, but then took this one class and did much worse than usual, and maybe there's an explanation that the college should hear. So it's also, character, making the academic case, and also any kind of factual explanation that needs to happen. But there's also spaces in the college application for students to reinforce that message or do that themselves too. Okay, so early decision and early action. We mentioned that a little bit before, but I'll just touch on it right now. Early action is where you apply to a college with an early deadline. Now, normal college deadlines usually in January. The early deadlines often in October and November. And early action is where, say, if a college has an early action deadline of, November 10th, then you would have to apply to the college by that time. And that also means trying to get your letters of recommendation in that time. So it takes some, planning before, because you have to give your teachers, at least a month notice to write your letters, and your counselor. And we'll go over the deadlines for juniors to know when to turn these things in. But, you have to get ready for these early deadlines. And the early action one is not binding. So if you are accepted, usually you hear back from the college whether or not you're accepted. Anywhere from December to February. So unfortunately, if you apply early action, you don't always hear back super early from the colleges. So in many cases, you have to do just as many college applications as if you didn't apply early action, because your due dates for the other colleges might be in January, and you don't hear whether you got in early action at that school until the middle of February. So you still have to kind of go about it and do all those. But early decision is the one where you apply with that earlier deadline, and then if you're accepted, you're withdrawing all your other applications and you're going just to that one college. So that's kind of like a binding contract. And the idea is that if you're doing that, the college should give you extra consideration and maybe even an extra weight, extra bump in admissions. But like I said, some colleges don't have a higher acceptance rate for early decision or early action. So it's not always a great way to go. But with other colleges, it could really add an advantage. So it's very school specific. But in some cases too, colleges do, if you apply by the regular deadlines in January, colleges will actually see your first semester grades from senior year. So that can be a plus for some people or not so much for other people. But if you do want them to see your first semester grades from senior year, then you'll want to apply with the regular deadlines. And because we send those transcripts out in early February, and usually they haven't started reviewing yet, so they do look at those. And especially if you had, say, some rough grades in 9th or 10th grade, but your 11th grade was good, and you want to show that trend is still going up, then you might want to give time to include the senior first semester grades, because they won't see those if they apply early action or early decision. Okay, we talked about missing the days for tours. Also, teacher work days, great time to see colleges, goes on tours. Tours, to do a campus tour at a college, you just go on their website, they usually have a calendar you can sign up. They'll offer them during the week, on the weekends, sometimes even in the summer or vacations. It's good to try and go when students are on campus so you can kind of see things in operation, but always the tours can be good. Some are going to be more kind of lively, informative than others. It does depend, unfortunately, a lot on the personality of the tour guide. I've had ones that have gone either way, where I've learned great stuff, had great conversations. Other ones where I kind of feel like, well, I could have got most of that on the website. So after you go, to a couple or a few of them, you'll see differences, but you can't really place being on campus. And it does take longer, I think, to schedule these and to work time in, especially if the college isn't close by, if it's a couple or few hours more away. So I think it's good to start anytime in high school. You can start touring colleges in 9th and 10th grade completely fine. And I would start thinking about it at the beginning of junior year and coming up with some timeframes to sign up for them. Some of the colleges also do fill up in advance pretty far. So I would say starting, you'd want to start looking at some specific dates, windows, weeks at the beginning of junior year, and give yourself enough time to work in several of them. Does Marshall provide any courses in computer programming? Yes, that'd be a good one to ask the counselor about. We do have some classes in that area. What is shown on a transcript for college to see? Is it the end of the year grade only or the grade by the quarter? What about if it's a rolling grade book? Yes, good question. So the grades that colleges see are the final grade. So if you're a senior, you send your transcript off to colleges, it will have your final grades for 9th, 10th, and 11th, and maybe an 8th grade class or a class from middle school if you're carrying the credit towards high school, say like an Algebra 1 class or a Spanish 1 or something. They will see the final grades only. They won't see quarter or semester grades. And if it's before the end of the first semester and you're a senior, they will just see your senior schedule. They won't see any grades. And then we send an updated transcript to them when you're a senior after first semester, if you've already applied there, and that does have your first semester grades. And that's the only time they see a semester grade, is that first semester senior year with an updated GPA. And it generally changes a little bit because it's just a half a year mixed in with, three other years. Occasionally, if you're applying someplace early, like early action, early decision, there's a handful of colleges that might ask for first quarter grades, but it's pretty rare. And even though it does happen, we also have a big statement that we send with the grades that explain our rolling grade book and standards-based grading and how everything works, and how quarter grades are really not an accurate measure of kind of overall academic performance, and so that's pretty common. Colleges know that by now. They're very familiar with the different grading systems, rolling grade books, standards-based, and also, IB. But they still may ask, but we explain them in context. Okay, if we take any course from outside the Marshall School for credit, does Marshall accept it? That depends. You'd have to talk with your counselor about that one, about whether or not the county would accept the credit. Next question. If a student takes high school level courses in middle school, how does it? Oh, so we just talked about this one. Does it show the grade the student was in when they took the course? Yes. So if you have a middle school credit on your high school transcript, it will say the name of the middle school and the grade, and it will have the letter grade that you got. And there's also a chance to remove that, though, from your high school transcript if you want to. So just talk with your counselor to see what the window is for removing it, because there's a certain deadline where you can request that by. So, you might not need to show that Algebra 1 from middle school or that French 1 to the college if you've gone on and you've taken much higher French, every year. You've got much higher math every year, and maybe you got a B in middle school or a C, but your grades since then have been all kind of, B pluses and A minuses. That middle school grade might actually be lowering your GPA. So you might want to talk with your counselor about whether or not it makes sense to remove that from the transcript. Okay. Do grades from summer courses get included on the transcript? Yes, if the student is taking them, if they're approved for credit towards the high school diploma. If you repeat a course, the new grade shows up on the transcript. It doesn't remove the old grade, but again, the counselor will be the best kind of source of info on grading and transcripts. Okay, any other questions? I think I worked to the end of the chat list here. If anyone has any other questions, just go ahead and plop them in the chat. All right, let me just scoot up here and make sure I didn't miss any. Well, that sounds great. Oh, okay, here we go. What are the maximum number of courses we can take during the summer? Good question. Better for a counselor. I'm not sure about that one. These will all come up over the next month in course registration. So this is February is the time where these conversations start. So just prepare your student with the right questions to ask, and so when they're pulled out of class, they'll be able to ask the right ones. And of course, you can follow up with follow-up questions, throughout the spring. The schedules aren't set in stone when they do the first one with the counselor, but it's good to have them on hand. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining. Do contact me if you have other questions. This will be on the website probably the day after tomorrow. So it's great to see everyone, and thank you so much for joining.